All right, welcome back to day number 24 of 30 Days Q&A. What I want to dig into today, it's one of the biggest, most important challenges that I think is going to come up for all of you as you grow and as you become more successful, which is this idea of how to respond to trolls or negative feedback. And the truth is, as you grow and as you attract a bigger audience and you become more successful, then inherently you're going to come across some trolls and people who don't resonate with you, don't resonate with your music. And I know that as a musician, it can be especially challenging when you have a troll or you have some negative feedback. And this doesn't just apply to musicians, but anyone that has a following understands this, that you might get a comment or someone just really doesn't like you or someone says something vicious or venomous. And I think understanding how to respond to that or how do you deal with that is really important. And so I thought that I'd answer this and share a troll comment that I got as a submission to this 30 Days of Q&A. All right, so this was a submission that came from Terry, and he was not a fan of the idea of tour hacking. Basically, he said that I feel like anyone who would go out and do this in tour hacking is a scam. It's borderline criminal. Went on to say, I'm associating you with a form of low-life thieves, blank words that I wouldn't want to share with my kids. Should be in jail for taking advantage of desperate, uninformed, vulnerable people. F off. And a couple of things to note here when it comes to receiving feedback, things like this, because it is something that I know is a struggle for musicians. When we launch these virtual tour hacking campaigns, what happens is that our brains aren't designed to focus on negative feedback or troll comments or things like that much more than we focus on everything else. And so out of the 1,500, 1,600 responses that I got that were very positive and helpful and were thankful, it's much easier for me to identify and focus on one submission like that. And if I'm not careful, to dwell on it or take it personally. And same thing applies to your music. And as you launch your virtual tour hacking campaigns, I guarantee you, it's just a matter of time until you get someone who responds to the music and says, this is awful, you're trash, like your music is no good, go get a real job, your music's not good enough. And when that comes in, learning how to respond to it, I think is really important. A couple of things. One, just to clear the air in terms of tour hacking. The point of tour hacking, walking up to fans waiting in lines for shows and connecting with them, building a relationship, making offers for CDs and them getting a CD if they like the music. We did this a lot. We traveled for about 6 months and we jumped between a bunch of different tours. I think there's probably about 11 or 12 different tours that we did this on total. And the bottom line is that if you're going to do something like tour hacking, then there's a couple different mindsets you could take when you're approaching people. One is if you have a scarcity mindset and you think that there's a limited amount of resources to go around, then you can try to hide the fact that you're walking up to these fans and that you're meeting all these people. And if you do that, then I think that your results are going to be much, much worse versus if you do it the way that we did it, which was we didn't try to hide the fact that we were walking up to fans waiting live for shows from the headliners. And we made every effort to connect with them. And actually, we built great relationships with the headliners by doing this and letting them know that this was happening. And in fact, that's how we booked a tour with All Time Low, was by connecting with them and by doing this. And I will say, out of the 12 or so bands that we did this on, there was one tour where the headlining band was not cool with us doing it. And so we transitioned from that one. And interestingly enough, that band didn't stick around for very long. They weren't successful, probably because they had some mindset issues around abundance and scarcity in general. If someone buys a $5 or $10 CD from you standing in line for a show, do you think that they're more or less likely to buy a CD from the headlining band that they went out to see? They're way more likely to buy a CD. It's sort of like greasing the wheels. I think if you have $5 or $10 that they're spending to support you and get one of your CDs in lines for shows, it makes them way more likely to actually get a t-shirt or to get a CD from the headlining band that they went to. And I think that's probably part of the reason that the bands were happy and willing for us to go do this. So that's just one thing that I wanted to clear up when it comes to that specific response, that tour hacking is somehow fundamentally wrong or it's like you're stealing. I wouldn't recommend trying to hide the fact that you're doing this. I would recommend coming at it from a point of trying to provide value both to the headlining bands and to the fans waiting in lines for shows. So now on to the bigger purpose of this video, which is more about responding to trolls or negative feedback, and how do you respond when you get a negative comment like that. It's a tricky balancing act because on one hand, sometimes you can actually get really constructive feedback and you can actually get a lot of learning lessons from feedback that you get, and you actually want to take it into account. But in most cases, when you get a troll, my advice would actually be to, quote unquote, don't feed the trolls. In fact, I probably wouldn't have even brought up or mentioned or responded to this person if it wasn't for, I thought that it was a good learning lesson or an example that I could share with you guys here. I think that it is possible if you can have fun and you can not take it personally, then it is possible to respond to some of these trolls. But I think in most cases, what I would actually recommend is, quote unquote, don't feed the trolls, because when you feed the trolls, then it tends to make their voice louder. It tends to make things worse. If you're running ads, for example, to your virtual tour hacking campaign, and then in the comments, there's 8 people who say, "This is awesome. I love the song." And then there's one person who says, "This is total garbage," or "This is trash. You suck." Just delete those comments. It's okay to draw a firm limit if someone's being abusive or like venomous, especially if they're swearing at you, then you want to ban that. You just want to draw a hard line. At the same time, I think it's important to bring an element of compassion or understanding that when everyone's doing the best that they can, that they know how, and if someone feels like they need to viciously attack you or be venomous or really try to cut you down, then it likely has more to do with them than it does with you. And usually what's happening is they're going through a lot of pain themselves, or they've been hurt in their lives. And so it's just, they haven't learned how to deal with that. And so I think it's important to have a sense of compassion. And if someone does attack you, or someone's a troll, or says like you're garbage or you're trash, and says some really mean, hurtful things that are meant to like really try to cut you down, then I would recommend sending them love. They must be really dealing with some hard stuff right now to have to feel like they have to attack me like that. The last thing that I want to point to in terms of responding to negative feedback is this idea of, is it possible to draw actually something constructive or draw like good learning lessons? If I'm just turning myself off to all negative feedback, then what if someone is saying something that's actually true? And so it's something I need to learn from. I think there's a pretty distinct line between constructive feedback and negativity and abusive types of messages. And I would highly recommend that you do have a system for gathering constructive feedback that you can use to improve your music or use to improve the way that you're serving your fans. When we talk about in-tune surveys and building relationships, you want to make sure that you actually have questions that are designed to help you to improve your music. One example, we call this your lean in-tune survey, but after someone listens to your song, if you ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate the music? And if they said anything but a 10, if you ask them what would make it a 10, the answer you get to that question is probably going to be something constructive. And in a lot of cases, it's actually going to help you to understand, wow, I could maybe improve X, Y, or Z. We have a graduation database from our artists who join our coaching program. And when they graduate, we have a list of questions that we ask them, including just getting clear on why they joined, getting clear on their biggest wins or highlights or milestones. And then we have a section called Ideas to Improve. And we get so much valuable feedback from this section right here. We do this for every single artist that graduates from our program. And it's great for us to keep a finger on the pulse of, are there any things that we need to update or improve? And if we didn't have this system for constructive feedback, then we might not realize that now that we have our new Street Team software, we added all these new awesome features, but now we need to update the training portal to include the integration with the CRM. And so that's a lot of the feedback that we're getting. Constructive feedback is, this is something that was challenging, this is something we need to improve. And so the point is that there is a time and a place to get constructive feedback, and you want to build systems that allow you to gather that constructive feedback and that allow you to not take it personally if you get a troll or negative feedback from someone who doesn't know who you are, someone who's dealing with their own stuff. The more successful that you become, the more trolls that you're going to have to learn how to deal with. And this isn't something that goes away. Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran and people like that, no matter how successful you are, you could be the #1 artist in the world and you're going to have people who are like, you suck. I absolutely hate you. And they just don't resonate with you. And part of that comes down to the in-tune process and making sure that you're targeting the right people who are actually resonating with you. And in some cases, it might not even be that there's a right or a wrong. In some cases, it just means that if they're a death metal fan, then they're probably not going to like country music, even no matter how good the song is. So if you're targeting the wrong people, it's just going to clash. So one thing that you can do, if you go back to our lookalike audience training, if you want to implement something to basically filter out all of the wrong fits, you could create a lookalike audience. You could just tag all those people who are trolls in Street Team. And then as soon as you have 100 people who are tagged as a troll, now you can create a lookalike audience from that troll audience. And then from there, you can actually filter out. You can say, here's my targeting audience, and I want to exclude anyone who is in this lookalike audience of trolls. Hopefully that's helpful. It's never fun to deal with negative feedback or negative comments, and it's something that's just part of the journey, and it's important to have compassion and love and to learn what you can from it. If there's something serious to address, sometimes it can be helpful to address those things. But in general, I would recommend not taking it personally. I'm having a little bit of a coughing fit here as I do this last one, but I hope this is valuable. If you got value from it, if you do me a favor and